"Are you sure you've got all the rules memorized?" the boss asked, grabbing his belongings as he prepared to leave for the day. "Absolutely. Every one of them is right up here," came the confident reply as a finger pointed to the head. A nod from the boss, and he was out the door of the small office, headed home. The boss was an odd character, to say the least. It had been just a month since the new security guard had started at the cemetery, conveniently located near his home. Fresh out of college for about 3 months, the last several shifts had been monotonous, sitting around, monitoring cameras, and patrolling the graveyard to ensure everything was in order. Not the most thrilling job, but it paid well. The flyer had promised no experience was required, leading him to believe they were desperate for someone to fill the position quickly. Seizing the opportunity, he had taken the job. Strangely, he didn't even know the boss's name. The hiring process had been a quick phone call. Walking in on the first day, he found himself surprised by the lack of training or guidelines. The boss had simply handed him a verbal list of 9 rules to be memorized before Halloween night. "Remember, these rules only apply on Halloween night," the boss had emphasized, his tone almost sounding like a threat. "You must follow them precisely as I tell you. I trust you'll do exactly as instructed." This left the new guard puzzled. The boss was certainly peculiar. To ensure he didn't miss any details, the new guard had started an audio recording on his phone, capturing every word of the boss's rule list. As the boss concluded the instructions, he was left in disbelief, thinking, "This guy is insane. No wonder they couldn't find anyone willing to work here." The rules were undeniably crazy, designated for Halloween night exclusively. It was impossible to grasp the extent of their peculiarity without hearing them for oneself. Reciting the boss's rules verbatim, the new guard had recorded the list, capturing the absurdity of the situation. Rule number 1. Arrive at exactly 8:30 p.m. on Halloween night, not a minute earlier or later. Do not enter until it's precisely 8:30, please, for your sake. Rule number 2. Remain inside the office until 9:15. Stay occupied, but do not check the security cameras during this time. They'll be turned off anyway. Don't give in to the urge. If the monitor switches on by itself, do not look. If it reveals Section A, turn off the lights and hide. If it reveals Sections B or C, and you catch a glimpse, run. Cover the monitor to avoid seeing the horror that unfolds on Halloween night. Rule number 3. After 9:15, you have 30 seconds to leave the office, leaving the door unlocked. You might encounter an abnormally tall figure without a face. Greet him with "good evening" while staring at his non-existent eyes. If he remains silent, continue patrolling. Should he speak, freeze. Do not move. Allow him to pass by. He'll eventually leave and slam the office door behind him. Rule number 4. Proceed to Section A. Ignore the fact that the grave labeled James R. Hackney is being excavated. Focus ahead. Do not peer into the 6-foot hole. You'll regret it if you do. Move on to Section B without looking back. Rule number 5. Upon crossing the bridge from A to B, you'll spot shadowy figures encircling the massive oak tree. Identify the figure wearing the black top hat. Approach from behind and ask, "Am I clear?" If a voice inside your head answers, continue. Proceed to Section B. If silence prevails, wait. You can glance at the other section, but brace yourself emotionally. Don't look directly. Rule number 6. Upon receiving the green light, continue to Section B, wander around, and perform your routine. However, you must stay in this section until 10 o'clock. By now, it's around 9:30, 9:45. Once the clock strikes 10 o'clock, proceed. Rule number 7. After leaving Section B, you'll sense a shift in temperature and light. Time will inexplicably jump to 2 o'clock a.m. Ignore your ringing phone. It'll be persistent. Do not answer. Stand still until the ringing ceases, usually half an hour. The caller IDs will be familiar: mother, father, siblings, girlfriend, or boyfriend. These aren't actually them. It's the faceless man attempting to lure you back to the office. Avoid the office until further notice. The calls will cease, and it'll be around 2:30 am when you can proceed. Rule number 8. Another temporal leap follows, advancing to 4:30. If your phone still reads 2:30, you've erred. Your actions are beyond repair at this point. Complete Section C inspection. Be ready for a blood-soaked woman seeking help, inquiring about her baby. Instruct her to meet you outside the cemetery in 10 minutes. She'll run in the opposite direction if you respond correctly. Tidying up the bloody towels is your sole maintenance task. Discard them in the nearest waste bin. Rule number 9. Having completed the tasks, rush back to the office. Do not look aside. Figures will populate your peripheral vision. Voices will call your name, seemingly familiar. Keep moving forward. Upon reaching the office, you'll encounter the faceless man leaving. He'll stop you, saying either "good work" or "come with me." If he opts for the former, enter the office, and he'll shut the door behind you. You can then attend to cameras and paperwork until my arrival. If he demands the latter, run, barricade yourself in the office. Ignore his soothing tone. He's anything but calm if you fail. Wait for his banging to cease, then cover your eyes for the final hour. Open them only when you hear 3 knocks, signaling my shift's beginning. Having heard the rules as well, you can comprehend my initial disbelief. The guard would recount, reflecting on his first day. This job was supposed to be a prank. That's what he had assumed. It was only after surviving the night that his perspective shifted drastically. On the appointed night, he arrived at 8:30 p.m., true to the instructions. As the boss departed, he took off, determined to follow the strange rules out of curiosity and a hint of humility. Obediently, he bypassed the security cameras and proceeded outside, encountering a tall, faceless man, a figure that induced genuine unease. Stammering, he greeted the figure with a hesitant "good evening" and watched as it proceeded toward the door. His heart raced as he advanced to Section A. And there it was, the grave labeled James R. Hackney, dug up just as instructed. Squirming with discomfort, he looked away and hustled to Section B. Under the oak tree, the eerie figures awaited, one with a top hat. Although his query received no response, he couldn't resist glancing over to Section B, stumbling upon a surreal sight. Himself, but taller, and drenched in blood. A guttural scream escaped him as the blood-soaked figure charged toward him, only to evaporate into thin air. Miraculously, the voice in his head instructed him to continue. The night dragged on, punctuated by strange events and terrifying encounters. From strange temperature shifts to time leaps and unnerving calls, he navigated the cemetery, each step more surreal than the last. He couldn't shake the sense that this was undeniably real, not just a prank. Ultimately, he locked himself in the office at dawn, shaking and bewildered. That's when he met the boss again, a man who introduced himself as James Randall Hackney, explaining that he'd been deceased for 2 centuries, resurfacing every Halloween night to recharge. With a cryptic smile, the boss thanked him for covering his duties that night. Awestruck, the guard packed his belongings, fled the town, and never returned. The bizarre tale of that Halloween night haunted him forever after.